I'm going to explain you how you can tell the motion clarity of your display with a single UFO test very easily, because I want your feedback. People ask me, hey, what about the C2 at 60 Hz with OLED Motion Pro? How good is it? And I don't know because I don't have it to test it. But you have an LG C2 or G2 and you can tell me. So that's what I'm looking for. So how can you tell the motion clarity of your display? I am also interested in other displays like the Alienware QD It's like 165 Hz. And also if you have an MSI, so if you have that MSI QD OLED that is 240 Hz with PWM, I mean, I already know it's 2 milliseconds, but it would be nice if you can tell me, if you can confirm the values. And it is so easy, extremely easy to tell. I'm going to explain you how. I'm also going to give you the feedback that I got from my Plasma TV motion clarity video. I got very good feedback, and that's exactly what I'm looking for here. So let me explain you first this UFO test. What is that we are looking for? We are looking for 1 pixel of motion blur, and that is the UFO alien 3 eyes have clear eye pupils and eye whites. That's what we're looking for. So we are going to get 1 pixel of motion blur. That is considered as good as it's going to get in terms of motion clarity. And you can get that when the pupils are perfectly visible. So the pupils of the alien here, the eyes, these pupils are perfect, okay? So for that, you need to make sure that your display is at native resolution, that you have 100% scaling. So the display scaling is set to 100%, and you have 100% zoom on the browser. So no additional zoom, because if you zoom the browser, that changes the resolution of the test, okay? That's it. So then you come here to this UFO test, and you're going to change the speed of the test to the maximum number that will still give you perfect eyes on the alien. So the pupils of the alien are going to be perfect, absolutely perfect. No blurry, no blurry. So that maximum number, that's going to be exactly the motion clarity of your display. So for example, let's say we have a display, is LG C1 at 120 Hz without black frame insertion. I open the test, and at 120 pixels per second, it looks perfect. The eyes are perfectly visible. So what that means is that the persistence is 8 milliseconds. Okay, so how you calculate that is you just divide 1. So you divide 1 by 120, and that's, you multiply that by 1000 just to get the result in milliseconds, because 120 Hertz is 120 frames in 1 second. So you divide 1 second in 120, and you multiply that by 1000 to get the result in milliseconds, so that's 8.33. So what that means is that if you lower the speed, so you have 1 pixel per frame, then that's the persistence of your display. So 1 pixel per frame looks perfect at 120 pixels per second. That means the equivalent of 120 Hertz sample and hold display. Okay, because 1 pixel per frame means this is the pixel moving like this. Let's say the pixel is moving, is here, then it's here, then it's here, then it's here. So it's 1 pixel per frame. That's the ideal. So if you change the speed of the test to 240, like on the Plasma TV, and that was the feedback that I got, and the alien looks perfect, that means that the Plasma TV at 60 Hz has the equivalent motion clarity of a 240 Hz sample and hold display. Okay, but that is ignoring the gray to gray and other motion blur limitations that the display can have. And the plasma does have those limitations. So let me read you the feedback that I got here. This is Bruno George Moraes, and he has been on the channel for a while, giving me a lot of good feedback and a lot of good information. He's very into this stuff, okay? So I like a lot people like him who give me good feedback because I want to learn. I'm here to learn. I've been learning a lot from you. I mean, I can say I learn more from you than what you can learn from me, basically. And what I'm gonna try to do is everything that I learn from you, I will put that together, okay? So it's basically the way that I have to I don't know how to say that in English. So retroactively grow the community. So I explain you something, then people give me more about that, and then I do another video with the new knowledge. That's what I'm gonna try to do. So what Bruno tells me here is that he tested on his plasma TV, and it is indeed the plasma TV, for example, at 60 Hertz, it looks perfect at 240 pixels per second. So you come here, you change the speed to 240 pixels per second, and you can see the pupils of the alien. You can see the pupils perfect. UFO alien 3 eyes have clear eye pupils and eye whites. But then he says that at 480 pixels per second, the eyes are perfect, but little squares on the ship have some PWM random noise. So because of his observation, I am not sure, but what I believe is going on here is that at 480 on the plasma TV, for example, the pupils are still going to be visible, okay? But they are not going to be perfect. They are going to look like this, like 2 pixels of motion blur. UFO alien 3 eyes can be counted, but they are still blurry, okay? So, and not only that, he's also telling me that there are other imperfections on the motion also. So the plasma TV has limitations in gray to gray and other, I'm not sure if it's the phosphorus decay, because the phosphorus decay is very fast. It's like 1 millisecond, I believe. I'm not sure. But whatever it is, there is definitely some limitations. So the plasma TV is not... So let me explain you this. When we are lowering the speed, what we are testing and what we are finding is the perfect, so the minimum motion blur that would be possible with that level of persistence, okay? But because the speed is low, that is not going to be showing you the other defects that the display can have, like gray to gray limitations, okay? So on the plasma TV at 240 pixels per second, it looks perfect. But then you increase the speed and the motion goes down the toilet completely, and it shouldn't, okay? And the reason why that happens is because other factors are affecting the motion clarity. So when that happens, we can say that that display is not following the Blurbuster's law closely, okay? Because the Blurbuster's law is assuming perfect conditions. It's assuming that the gray to gray and other motion blur potential factors are ideal, and it is only considering the persistence, okay? So you have to be aware of that. So what I want you to do is to, for example, on the C2, use 60 Hertz, 4K, 100% scaling, 100% zoom on the browser, change the speed here to 120 pixels per second, and use OLED Motion Pro. It should be perfect. So the eyes of the alien should be perfectly visible. So that when you increase the speed to 240, what happens? I'm gonna tell you what happens on the LG C1. The eyes are blurry, but you can still distinguish the eyes, okay? Because actually the motion clarity is in between 120 and 240, okay? It's actually 158, if I remember correctly. Let me just do the calculation here real quick. And I'm not going to explain you again this, because it would take me some time to explain this. So I'm just doing a calculator here. I explained this already. So basically, the motion clarity of the LG C1 using 60 Hertz with OLED Motion Pro High is the equivalent of 158 Hertz. Okay, so it's better than native 120. So what I want to know on the LG C2 is if that's the case. So basically, if it's 120, or maybe it's less than 120, maybe it's exactly 120 and not 158. So the ideal test here would be if we were able to change this speed to any number. So if we could basically just type in the number. So I'm going to communicate with the Blurbuster chief, because I am in communication with him, and I'm gonna ask him if it's possible to update this test and have an option here to just type in the number, because that would make the motion clarity test so simple. Just open the test, increase this number to the maximum number that would still allow you to see the pupils of the alien. That's it. End of the story. So for example, if that number is 200, exactly 200, if you increase it a little bit more, of course, to determine like just 210 and 200, maybe it's difficult to see by eye, but you're going to find that limit for sure. So after you find that limit, if it's 200, what that means is that the minimum motion blur that your display or that display can have is the equivalent of a 200 Hertz sample and hold display. Okay, and we can say that the guaranteed minimum motion blur of that display is going to be 1 divided by 200 multiplied by 1000, and that's gonna be 5 milliseconds of persistence, which is equal to 5 pixels of motion blur when moving at 1000 pixels per second. So the guaranteed minimum motion blur that display can have is 5 pixels of motion blur. And it is going to be less, it is going to be more than that, so it's going to be worse if that display has other limitations like refresh compliance. Like they like to say that on LCD screens that the gray to gray is not fast enough for the refresh rate. There is a little bit, it is not as good as it should be. So they call that display refresh rate compliance. Okay, so that's it. So I'm gonna see if it's possible to do an update here on this test. But if this is all you have and you want to figure it out, and you want to figure it out exactly. So you do this test, for example, on the C2 or the G2, and you see, okay, at 120 it looks perfect. At 240 it's no longer perfect, but you don't know exactly what is the in-between value. That's where it gets tricky. That's where it gets tricky. So I'm gonna tell you how I figured it out on the LG C1, but the problem is I figured it out at 120, and the C2 and G2 don't have 120 black film insertion, and it only has one option. And the reason why I was able to figure it out at 120 is because we have 3 options on the LG C1. At 120 we have low, actually we have 4, we have auto, but I'm not gonna talk about that because that changes dynamically depending on what's going on. I have to do a separate video about that. I'm still figuring that out. So we have low, medium, high. So at 120, I did some comparisons, okay? So it was very easy to see that medium, so OLED Motion Pro medium, was 50%. So basically, at 120, for example, if I increase the speed of the test to 240 and I use OLED Motion Pro medium, that looks exactly, without any doubt, that looks exactly the same as not using OLED Motion Pro and moving at 120 pixels per second. So what that means is that OLED Motion Pro medium at 120 is reducing the persistence, is dividing the persistence in half. That's what it means. So I started by establishing, okay, what is medium? So I already know. And then I start comparing different options. And I realized that Motion Pro High, running at 120 Hz on the LG C1, and the speed being 960 pixels per second, was giving me the exact motion blur, the same exact motion blur as OLED Motion Pro Medium moving at 720 pixels per second. Okay? So 720 pixels per second OLED Motion Pro Medium looks the same as 960 pixels per second OLED Motion Pro High. So I have an equation there. That's an equation. And because I know that medium is 50%, I just do the math. so I just do the math. And that's how I figured out what was high. That's it. And for low, I did the same thing. I figured out that OLED Motion Pro Low with 4 pixels per frame was looking the same as OLED Motion Pro Medium with 6 pixels per frame. Okay? And I did the equation. Okay, so I know that medium is 50%. What is low? Low is 75%. So this percent that I'm talking about, 50% or 75%, that is the size of the scrolling. So the width. So what OLED Motion Pro, and I wanted to do an easy video, but I have to explain because otherwise you don't know what we're talking about here. So what OLED Motion Pro does is it draws the image left to right, top to bottom. So what it does, once it has 50% of the screen using OLED Motion Pro Medium, it scrolls that down, 50% of the screen. And what that does is that it reduces the pixel visibility time in half. So it reduces the persistence. So the pixel visibility time is what gives you the motion clarity, okay? The maximum, the best motion clarity that you can achieve. So that's what I'm talking about. 75% is OLED Motion Pro Low at 120 Hz. Is 75% window size. Medium is 50% window size. And high is 38% window size. And the way I determined that was by doing those 3 equations and figuring out that number. Now at 60, so for the C2 and the G2 at 60 Hz, you only have one option. So the only thing that you can do is you can compare 60 without any Motion Pro and with it. So at 60, 120 pixels per second is going to look blurry. The pupils are going to look like 2 pixels of motion blur. So the Alien 3 eyes can be counted, but are still blurry. At 60 Hz, 120 is going to be blurry. So then when you use Motion Pro, it is going to be clear. The question is, when you use 240, how blurry it is? That's the question. Because we are not able to change this to any specific speed. So yeah, let me know if you can give me a feedback after this explanation. I'm going to communicate with the chief of Blurbusters to see if it's possible to update so we can change this speed to an exact number. Okay, so on this LG C1 at 60 Hz, I would put here 150, I calculate 158, and that would be exactly the maximum speed I can use with 60 Hz OLED Motion Pro High on the LG C1 and still be able to see the pupils of the alien perfectly. And that would be ideal, but we don't have that option. So because we don't have it, we have to do a lot of it is more difficult to figure it out. So yeah, let me know. Oh, also I forgot, there's another, before I end the video, see if I still have some time. So there was another a subscriber here that gave me the feedback in Spanish. That's what I didn't mention it, because it was in Spanish, but he basically told me yes, the plasma TV at 240 pixels per second was looking perfect, and he has a Panasonic plasma TV. He's Namaskar. He's a friend that speaks Spanish. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions.